Welcome back to the Books Brothers Podcast, the podcast where longtime friends spread across the country reconnect through the pages of a good book. Each episode, we dive into what we are reading, sharing our thoughts and perspectives, all while enjoying a few laughs along the way. Whether you're a big reader or just here for the discussion, we're glad to have you join us as we explore insightful topics, narratives, all while connecting each week. I'm Adam.
I'm Fliz.
I'm Garrett.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Robb.
We are excited to have you join us this week. We are currently reading The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman and Nan Silver. This week we read and we'll be discussing Principle 6, Overcome Gridlock. But before we get into discussing that, let's take a break for a word from this episode's sponsor.
Ever find yourself staring at a group text wondering if yo means what's up or I'm falling apart emotionally? Introducing BroSpeak, the world's first bro-to-human translator. Built for guys who communicate exclusively through grunts, memes, and one-word replies. BroSpeak decodes all the classics. I'm chillin' actually means I haven't processed the feeling since 2014. She's just a friend means I'm emotionally invested and terrified. Want to lift means I need connection, but I'll only accept it under a barbell. It even features silent car ride mode with translating 4 minutes of brooding into I'm not okay, but let's not make it weird. So if your emotional fluency peaks at bet, it's time to level up. BroSpeak, because somewhere beneath that shrug is a whole lot going on.
There you go.
It's funny and yet also deep at the same time.
So what I'm hearing is that men need to process emotions more? Is that what?
I think so, yeah. It's really for me, honestly. That is really for me.
Well, no, now we don't have to because this app will do it for us.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Yeah. So for the one thing, when we talk about takeaways, several weeks back, Robb mentioned that him and Marianne were going to be doing the 7-week course in fondness and admiration that John Gottman had recommended. So Robb, if you want to just speak to a little about how that's been going.
Yeah, so to clarify, I'm just doing it, and so I'm reflecting upon different prompts from the book for a daily kind of exercise, and I'm journaling based on those prompts of fondness and admiration. So, there'll be things like, think about a time when you surprised your wife, and then it says, like, go surprise your wife tonight. Or it'll be, your wife isn't perfect. Name one thing that has gotten in the way, but that you've come to appreciate over time. Or, reflect and reminisce on your wedding day and things of that nature. So it's just been good to I think the chapter was really about like embracing your shared history. And so like that can help you recall certain events in your life, in your marriage, in your relationship that you hold near and dear. And this is just, there to help us recall those moments in a unique way. Just because, when there's times when maybe you're in a low in your marriage and your wife or partner can do no right, they seem to be doing everything wrong to you, or that you perceive them just because you're in a marital rut. This is an exercise that kind of helps bring out the fondness and the admiration for your spouse that you do have and you certainly once had, and it can kind of help that. I'm not doing it because we're in a marital rut. It's just a big exercise that I was like, I want to come back to this and actually do this. And so I'm doing it with Lent, and it kind of aligns perfectly for the week. So yeah, it's been good.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing. Next, let's talk about how they don't make them like they used to. In this section, we like to reminisce about what it was like growing up in the 90s. So for today's episode, I wanted to revisit some of the common phrases and sayings from our childhood. What are some of the common phrases that you all can think of? And yes, please use them in a sentence.
Yeah, I'm just chilling.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to ride your bike to the pool?
I mean, two of the ones that I thought of like right away were tight and sweet. When something was cool, you'd be like, oh man, those are some really tight cargo shorts. And you didn't mean that they were like tight on them. You meant they were cool.
Home skillet's a good one. And crunk.
Yeah.
Little John was coming into his own.
I don't think I ever actually used it, but I remember On fleek. That was a stupid one.
Was that? I feel like when do you feel like that was popular? I feel like that was like late high school.
Yeah, probably late high school.
One that I thought of that it just made me chuckle was when you're like signing a kid's yearbook, people would write Hackass. Do you guys remember that? So Hakas. You guys remember that?
Have a good.
So they would, have a kick-ass summer.
Have a kick-ass summer.
And I remember like just being younger and not knowing what that meant and thinking like, why did all the kids write this in my yearbook? But it is kind of funny to think about. I wonder if I feel like that there's no way that phrase is still being used. Maybe it is. I don't know.
What's funny is what I thought I thought you were going with that was, remember when people would sign your yearbook and there would be that one guy who wrote, "I signed your crack" in between the two.
Yeah.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
Oh yeah, no. So, Adam, you've mentioned before how like I dyed my hair the one year. So there's one yearbook. I remember this was a couple years ago. Ruth and I were, for whatever reason, going through old yearbooks and all the people who like signed them and stuff. And so there's one yearbook, and I think it's from 7th grade, where like tons of people wrote like, "I love your hair. Your hair is so great." All these kind of things. And Ruth was like, "What? Oh my gosh! Like people really liked your hair." And I didn't realize until a ways in, it was like I had dyed it like yellow, like the day before.
Your frosted tips are now like Flez's 700-pound. But the bomb. Oh, man, that was the bomb.
That's a good one. My wife
I feel
still
like
uses
that makes me.
Thebomb.com.
She says thebomb.com.
Do you know what
Also
DeBomb reminds
good.
me of too?
What?
Do you know what DeBomb reminds me of too? The
NFL
greatest
Blitz.
play in NFL Blitz.
Yes.
That's what I was just going to say.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. The bomb, man. That was guaranteed touchdown every time. Except if you're playing Matt.
That's true.
Against Matt.
It was the worst feeling playing that when you had a breakaway and the game was just rigged, where
you knew you were going to fumble the ball
around you. It would slow you down.
Yeah.
And the guy is like, "There's no way."
Not if you were on fire, the guys would drag on you. You'd be dragging them behind you.
It was infuriating.
You just got to play better.
I still have that game.
Do you?
Yeah, on Dreamcast.
What system? Do you have
Sega
a Dreamcast?
Yeah.
Oh man, I kind of forget about that one.
Am I living under a rock? What's a Dreamcast?
Sega.
That was like
the first one.
Yeah, my bad.
The first one that had discs.
I remember playing like
cartridges.
Tekken on that. Like Street, it was like Street Fighter.
Yeah, Street Fighter, Crazy Taxi.
All right, well, let's move forward then. So as mentioned before, this week we read Principle 6, Overcome Gridlock. We discussed the concept of gridlock a few weeks ago, but gridlock is reached when you see the following signs. You've had the same argument multiple times and no resolution. Both parties are unable to address the issue with humor or empathy. The conflict has become increasingly polarizing, and compromise seems impossible because it feels like you'd be giving up something important and may even go against your core beliefs or values. Gridlock can happen on the topics of religion, finances, desires to have or not have kids, as well as career, but it also can happen on seemingly less deep topics like cleanliness of the home or how free time is spent. Gottman mentions that ultimately the goal is to avoid gridlock by being in tune with your spouse's values, desires, and dreams, but sometimes you find yourself in a situation where neither party is willing to move on their stance. He explains that this happens because we feel we are fighting for something deeper than the actual argument taking place. We are fighting for our core values or our personal dreams. An example that he gives, a couple that has become gridlocked on the topic of cleanliness of the home. The wife wants a more clean and tidy home, and the husband wants to feel more free in his own home. The wife grew up in a chaotic home that was never clean, and her parents were not present to take responsibility for making meals or other domestic activities. So from a really young age, she had all the responsibilities of taking care of her younger siblings and making sure she was at places on time. So her core value or dream is to not have her kids or family have the same experience that she had. On the other hand, the husband grew up in a home where his mom was overly concerned about appearances and the home looking immaculate. As a result, he was never comfortable in his home. His dream or desire is to feel free and comfortable in his home and not be overly concerned about chores. So in this situation, each spouse's dream situation is in contrast with the other spouse, which has caused gridlock. So we likely all have stories of gridlock ourselves, but the goal is to be able to communicate about these differences and acknowledge your partner's dreams, and through that, seek compromise. When facing gridlock, Gottman encouraged us to seek to understand and respect our partner's dreams and core values, even when they might be different than ours. So for you guys, what are some of the dreams or core values that you or your partner have that you've seen lead to conflict, potentially gridlock in the past?
So one of the conflicts that Emily and I had happened when we were more newlyweds, and it was the topic of when to have children. So Emily was the type of person who wanted children pretty much immediately. She would have been perfectly happy with having kids right after marriage. And I knew that about her going into it, which is fine. I did not want to have kids right after marriage. I wanted to have some more time just to spend with her, get to know her, build our relationship first. For Emily, being a mom has been her greatest desire for her entire life. And so just kind of talking through that when we were newlyweds, it didn't necessarily cause conflict, but it's something that we didn't agree on. And it probably caused both of us anxiety and worry that we didn't communicate well at that time. And it was a lot of talks of when to have kids, when should we have kids, when should we start trying, because everyone knows when you start trying, it's very possible that you will not get pregnant right away. It could be months, it could be years. You just never know.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard from the people, friends, influential people in my life that you probably should have some more time, just you two being married before you have kids. And so that's where I was leaning towards. Again, it didn't really cause conflict, but there's a little bit of tension every time kids were brought up, or other friends had kids and people our age starting having kids. It's like, okay, when are we going to have kids? So yeah, that was one thing that maybe caused a little bit of gridlock in our relationship.
I can share an example that's perhaps a career-based example, something that we would experience often at the beginning of Brooke's career when she was in medical school. She started medical school. That was our second year of marriage. And then residency. So these are time commitments that are extremely intense. Residency was like an average of 75 to 80 hours a week of work. That was the average. There were a lot of times where I would feel, lack of a better term, neglected. So I think when he's talking in the book about what are your dreams, there's a lot of things like, I want to feel like I'm enough, that you value me more than anything else, and to a certain extent, right? That I'm what comes first in your priorities. And there were a lot of occasions where I didn't feel that way. And something that our marriage counselor has helped us identify when working through gridlock is something she calls an infinity loop, where if my wife does something that can upset me, I'll get flooded. I can get upset and be defensive and respond a certain way. And that response is something that can trigger my wife and upset her, cause her to get defensive and respond a certain way. And then we're caught in this infinity loop where we're not actually making progress towards a solution. And I think a lot of times that is what we experienced with her career. I've always been supportive of her career. At times I've pushed her more than she's pushed herself. I don't know if I've ever shared, it's not like it's a super big secret, but she tried to quit med school in her second year. Like, she actually tried to quit, and the contract payoff, I believe it was a miscalculation, but it was close to like $1 million. And so it's like, oh, we're in this for the next decade, whether you want to be a doctor or not. So it like forced her to stay in, and she got other help. She was dealing with a lot of anxiety and stuff like that. She got the help that she needed, and she's a great doctor. So I'm really glad she's in it. So there's always been the support. It's more of like Flez's funny ad that actually has a lot of serious I don't think I did a great job of introspection and understanding what were my dreams underneath. And there was a lot of, hey, I feel like I'm really carrying the torch in a lot of ways to keep the house in order or the marriage going, fill in the blank, domestic duties, financial duties, whatever. Got to say duty in an episode. And then it didn't feel reciprocated. And while there was support on my end and understanding the time involvement on her end, there was still some elements where I was like, I need something like a date night or things like that. And I would grow impatient. I wouldn't respond well. And then I would kind of revert to my defensive, protective tendencies, one of the four horsemen, to protect my hurtness. And then that would hurt her and make her feel like she's not supported in her career and in the marriage. And the infinity loop would continue on. So that was a gridlocked issue that we've thankfully worked through. And I'm also grateful she's not in medical school or residency anymore. It helps when she's only working 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I'm sure. It is nice when you can look back at the thing and it's like, okay, we're not in that as much anymore. Like the one I would say early on in our marriage that it was something that I feel like my dream wasn't being like achieved. And so I've always been pretty active. And so that was something that I always like wanted to be really important in both my life, but also my spouse's life. But, Ruth grew up and she was a really good athlete. She was all state and track and played volleyball, swam, went to state for swim. She's really good at all these sports. And really by the time we were married, fitness was something that wasn't like a huge part of her life. She would play sports if there was an opportunity, but exercising routinely wasn't something that was really a desire of hers. Or it was a desire, but she had other desires that went out. And so that was something probably first 2-3 years in a marriage where I think it was like a recurring frustration I had where I would probably a lot of times not in the best ways bring guilt upon that topic of like, this was my hope, is that we'd have this very active lifestyle and maybe we'd be really adventurous and such and go out and do these big backpacking trips and all these kind of things. And it really took me, honestly, like maturing, I would say, for some of those kind of things to go away. And I think too, to see just that it's okay for her to have different passions, desires. And so it's something that I would say did cause some tension, and through time, it's something now where, not an issue at all anymore. And, but it was definitely for me for a while, definitely something where I was like, I feel like my dream wasn't realized in that, but kind of on the opposite, I would say. So Ruth grew up in a family where her dad is like, he's just really wise. He's very biblically sound, and he's very much like the spiritual leader. And I think I've always aspired to be that in our relationship, but I feel like just looking at their marriage, I feel like I fall short in that. And so that's one area sometimes where I known, at least in the past, that she's kind of wanted me to like take a more active role in spiritual leadership. And I know I haven't been the best about doing that for her. And so with a lot of the stuff he talks about where communication can be essential, I think for some of the things that I'm describing, it seems like it took time. But I think if we had better tools to communicate, maybe these would have been overcome sooner. So
nice. Yeah, I'll be real quick here. One of Marianne's dreams ever since she was a little girl is to sing and perform, and she is Broadway caliber. I mean, she could be on Broadway today, easy. And so that's always been, because we met because she was in the middle of the Atlantic working for Carnival, and then COVID happened, and then she came home, and then she met me, someone who's stable and has roots in the Midwest and wants to start a family and get a home. And that was not in Marianne's path or her future, certainly not when right before COVID happened, right? Like that wasn't something she was aspiring to do. But one thing that I've always told her ever since we started dating, and she was very honest about like, hey, I have these dreams, and these dreams are really like, I'm not sure if you guys have heard the term soul ties before, but it's like something so deep ingrained in your soul that like, it's like your grandma or like her grandma or her family saying like, don't let you quit. Like, we won't let you quit on this dream of yours. So it's like they stunt you in your 13-year-old self and your 18-year-old self, and so do you. And it's like, I'm doing this no matter what. It's kind of like at an all costs kind of mentality, but it's, it can come from a good place of like, you love it so much, and then that's for her. But I've always been very honest about like, hey, you can have both. You can be a wife and you can be a performer. And so that looks differently now, just because she's not at Broadway, but she's staying very actively employed here with theater, and she gets to have both, which is really cool. She actually, I don't think I've told any of you guys, but there's a Catholic high school 2 minutes up the road from us, and they were looking for a theater director because their director's leaving. Marianne has some choreography experience, some leadership experience, but she's never directed herself. But they offered her a part-time position, which is really cool because now she gets to merge her love for God and the faith into theater, which have been like two starkly like different things that you never would think would be able to be merged together, especially with just the theater scene being super liberal and the faith scene being super conservative. That's been a dream of hers for a long time too. And it's just cool to see that the continued yeses towards like a relationship with me, with God, has like allowed her to realize different dreams. And I've had to remain open and available to supporting her in that. And we looked at Chicago before we bought the house, and we would have been ready to move there if we both felt it, but we didn't. We kind of ruled out New York just based on the extremity of it. But yeah, I mean, hers is just wanting to continue to showcase her talents and sing for the gift that God has given her. And then the dream with me is just to be able to have a family and have a place. And it's kind of cool to watch how some at times those two things really rubbed up against each other and created for very uncomfortable conversations. But now they're merging together. And I would still support her if she wanted to go do like a 3-month stint at some theater in Washington or whatever, which she's had opportunities come, but we've just turned them down because they weren't right at the time. But that's kind of what we've dealt with probably the most.
That's cool.
I can think of an example from today with Sarah and I. For some reason, was like, I needed a vacation. I'm like really kind of burnt out and just haven't taken time off since our trip to the Grand Canyon in October last year. But I was looking at some cabins in Arkansas for a couple of days. Ooh. And sent Sarah some pictures, and then I said, oh, it looks like they have an opening from April 30th to May 2nd. And she sent back it was kind of a passive aggressive text of like, oh, that's like your birthday, my birthday weekend. But she was implying that like I shouldn't schedule it then because we're supposed to be doing something then, but she was being a little bit passive aggressive about it. And I called her out on that. And I was like, but we got into this little argument about like, I hate my birthday. I have always hated my birthday. So like me being away for my birthday is not a big deal to me. But to her, it's like the underlying dreams here are, I want to go away because I've never taken a solo trip, by myself with Nova. It's like this hike adventure thing. So that's like the dream there, I think, for me. The dream for her is wanting to have somebody to celebrate milestones with. And so our dreams are kind of clashing at the same time. And obviously we were able to, resolve that. But I don't know. I think that's a pretty good example of like the underlying reason why you want to do something. And kind of clashing with each other and then kind of resolving the issue. But so moral of the story is to schedule the trip another time.
Cool. Yeah, Adam, you kind of hit on it there some, but I really enjoyed how Gottman kind of talked about this concept of dreams and how when we have these big disagreements, it has to do with like our dreams, our expectations, and values and things. I think back to a lot of the recurring stuff that Ruth and I've had and everything that we talked about there. It was just like one person thought it was going to be, all your guys' examples. One person saw one vision for their future and the other person saw something slightly different. And yeah, I think it's about kind of talking through and working through those things.
For sure.
Well, so Gottman ends this section with giving the reader an outline for a conversation where you and your partner will work on a conflict that has become a gridlock. It goes as follows. Step 1, explore the dream. Seek to understand your partner's why behind their stance. Help them to understand your why. It is crucial not to criticize with this step or blame or badmouth. So seek to understand any core values or beliefs that might be tied up in the issue at hand. Step 2 is to soothe. Be mindful of how each of you are reacting to each other in the conversation. If flooding occurs, then you might need to take a short break from the conversation, either separately or doing an activity together that you both enjoy and calms you. Step 3 is to reach a temporary compromise. Each partner should consider their non-negotiable areas and also areas where they are willing to be flexible for their partner. Then come up with a temporary solution that both parties agree to. Since gridlocked issues are often unsolvable problems, the compromise does not have to be permanent, and it's best to plan a time in the future where the temporary compromise will be reassessed. And step 4, express your thankfulness and gratitude towards each other. Working on unsolved problems is not easy, and it shows your partner that you are in for the long haul. Show your partner that you are thankful that they care enough to work through these gridlocked issues. So I think that this is a really great framework for dealing with some of these unsolvable problems that we experience. And I personally hope to implement a process like this in the future. It can take definitely a ton of patience and intentionality, but it's important because marriage is important. So with that being said, how have you guys, so we each kind of shared a little about some of maybe the gridlock experiences that we have, but what are some of the ways that you all have sought to overcome some of these unsolvable problems in the past? And what have you found to be successful? Has it looked like this approach or has it looked different?
Yeah, I think whenever Emily and I have had conflicts, the steps that we've gone through, I mean, we didn't have them laid out like this, but they look somewhat similar. We probably don't do step 1, explore the dream in depth. We probably need to get better at understanding the root of the problem, understanding the problem in the moment and processing feelings. I think, yeah, we need to get to the why of the problem. But number 2, soothing, I think that's something we've done since we've been together. I think it's just in our personalities, really, where we're not great at dealing with conflict in the moment. So if one of us is feeling flooded, then we will step out of the room, go to somewhere else where we can take some deep breaths, process a little bit, maybe cry a little bit. It's mostly Emily. Just kidding, it's me. But then after a while, after we're soothed, then we can come back together and talk about it without those high emotions, without anger or bitterness towards each other. It's a very calm conversation, overall, very respectful, and just working through it, talking through it. And then afterwards, once we've talked through most of the things, we either express gratitude towards one another. A lot of times we end up praying with each other and just taking it to God. So I think having the steps laid out is very helpful, and it's something that I need to be mindful of in the future. Just have those steps in my mind. It's something to memorize and hold on to for future conflicts. I'm probably not going to be thinking about this in the moment, to be honest. Like,
yeah, my first
I'm in a
thought
conflict right now. I need to explore the dream. Step 1. No, that's not going to be happening. It's something that's going to take practice, and you have to actually do it before you're going to be good at it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to think of these steps in the moment, at least not for me.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, Matt. And it's like, I think we mentioned this with something else a couple weeks ago where it's like, yeah, it'd be nice if you had this right in front of you before it. But I feel like I do this thing where I ask like if it was written down, it's the right question to ask, but it's the way that I ask it, the defensiveness that I have, or like the accusatoriness that I have with it, where I'm like, yeah, that's because I mean, I think we're all probably a little bit like this, where maybe it's just me, but I think I let things bother me for too long, and then it builds up, and then it's like a lot of emotion. Whereas if I would have like addressed it initially, it'd have been a lot less emotion.
Totally.
Yeah.
My stapler.
I've never burned any buildings down, though. I can say that.
We can just talk about it because I know it's a thing, even if it's not in this group. But I would say their gridlock issue is just sex. So the typical friction point is frequency, but with therapy and being able to talk through the dreams behind it, there's a lot of, on my end, wanting, I've said it before, but wanting to feel wanted, which kind of gives some background on the med school residency experience, where it was like, hey, do you have 5 or 10 minutes for me? You have all this time for your med schools, whether it was sexual or not. And there was just that element of not feeling that way. And I think that's a lot of, there's a lot of different things. It's too much to unpack in one evening, but there were just a lot of, like, again, talking about the emotions. I think that's, and just being honest, I think that's another misconception, is that one of the things I like about sex is not just getting off, right? Which is the stereotype. Guys just got to get off. But the actual talking, communication, and feeling connection in a lot of different ways. So there's that element of wanting to just be connected and feeling desired, feeling wanted. And when that doesn't happen, then I can look at metrics. So it's like, all right, I'll feel wanted if we have sex 2 times a week. And Brooke's like, I work 80, 100 hours a week. How is that possible? Like, I'm too tired. I can't even, I'm exaggerating. She's like, I can't even feed myself when I get home. I just crawl into bed and go to sleep. So then there's elements of, we're never going to get over this. And I think with counseling, talking about it, and then another thing, having other relationships. So like the book club, like you guys, there's like, we connect in a lot of different ways, and we can't just have all of our eggs in one basket, which is our spouse, to fill our emotional and relational cup. So
That's really good.
It's hard to fully unpack that gridlock issue, but no one's talked about it, and yet it's like objectively the number one issue, that and money. So someone's got to talk about it. So I will talk about it. And I would say we haven't arrived. We made a lot of progress. And then Matt, I mean, you all can attest, since your wives have had babies. Actually, okay, I know I don't want to take up too much more time, but I think pregnancy and having a child is proof that you don't have to have sex all the time to feel full, right? I mean, like the doctor says, no sex for at least 6 weeks. And at least with our first kid, it was a lot longer than that, just with how much time.
What?
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that. I'm just being goofy there.
Oh, you did know that. Okay. So
I did not know that. No.
Yeah, like 6 weeks just to heal up, and then there's tears, and there's definitely like, what's your expectation? What's mine? Why is that expectation there? And then not taking that personally, because I think that's the hardest part, is like, hey, if you don't want to have sex as much as I want to, that means you aren't like interested in me, or you don't love me, whatever, insert the feeling or response, and understanding that may not actually necessarily be it. There may be other things going on her end that we just need to soothe, believe the best about each other, understand what's going on, figure out how to reach temporary compromises, and maybe get help, maybe go see a counselor, talk with your buddies. But you have to protect that pretty well. It's not like a casual thing when I say chat with your buddies, but and then expressing thankfulness and gratitude. I think that goes a long way. When you focus on the quality of the relationship, those other conversations about sex and, what to do during sex and frequency and stuff, those conversations go a little bit easier.
Yeah. It's really good, Garrett. Appreciate you sharing. Obviously a lot of good and deep stuff in there. I think one thing just to hit on even further is you talked about specifically just like the importance of like having a relationship with other friends. And so, both as the husband having, guy friends and your wife having female friends to be able to like get into deeper stuff with. And I know there was a men's group I used to be involved with, and that was something that was like hit on all the time about just don't, one of the major causes of conflict in marriage too can be trying to have your wife or spouse fulfill all your needs and not being able to be open with other guys about stuff. And I mean, I feel like I've seen that over and over again. And I feel like I even personally feel now whenever it's been a while when I've connected with some guy friends where I feel like, oh man, I sense that I'm like trying to fill that cup with Ruth when she can't. So it's good. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Books Brothers podcast. Join us next week as we close out the book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, with Principle 7, Create Shared Meaning. Garrett will be leading our discussion and hope you can listen in. If you've enjoyed listening or benefited from our conversation, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with a friend that you want to connect with. Lastly, we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us by email at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com or on Instagram at Books Brothers Podcast. Until next week, read, reflect, and connect.